I prepared something interesting and different and fun for y'all today. You see, my wife works in a local school in the all-girls high school here in Houston. And once a year, they have a retreat. They have a Shabbaton. They travel to some place, some ranch, an hour away, 2 hours away from Houston. And all the girls go there. And some of the staff members bring their families as well. And they have this like retreat. And it's very nice and it's very enjoyable. And it builds camaraderie. Everyone's a good time. And the last couple of years, they invited us to join. And they always say to me, listen, we want you to give a class, a presentation, join the panel. And this year they said to me, no, you can't join the panel. Because whenever you join the panel, you dominate it so thoroughly, we don't want you on the panel. But we're willing to, you give a class, a standalone class. I was a little bit offended. It's not fair to punish me, to penalize me for not being on the panel because you're too good at it and you have the answers and you don't stop talking. But I understand it. I think there's something to be said about that. So anyhow, I prepared the presentation that I'm going to share with you today. But the funny thing about it is, as it happened on Friday morning, we got a call that the ranch that we had rented out, there was a big storm and they're out of electricity. So there is no electricity. So there is no event, so that to cancel or postpone this Shabbaton. But I still have my presentation, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. And the idea that I always like to do in these classes, it's a one standalone presentation. So you want to do something impactful, and a format that I really like is where I ask questions and I try to elicit answers from the audience. And in particular, I selected 5 superb questions, one from each book of the Torah. Most of them have never been asked, maybe ever, I don't know, but maybe most of them are new. They're new. They haven't been on the podcast, any of the various different podcasts. And the idea is that a question, it expands your horizon. The ultimate goal of a question is to resolve it. But when you have a question and it irritates you, because how could you have such a question? Question destabilizes you, and it forces you to expand and to think and to come up with new creative solutions, which are an insight, which can create an insight that can really expand your spiritual horizons. But I like questions even if we don't have answers, because they're stimulating, they're interesting, and it does get you to think about the Torah on a deeper level. So I said, we'll do one question on every book of the Torah. Of course, there are a lot of questions you could ask in every verse and every word and every letter of the Torah. But these are, I found them to be interesting questions, intriguing questions, and ones that are fun to listen to and fun to ponder. So let's begin with question number 1 from Genesis. There's a memorable incident that happens in Genesis. Well, there are many memorable incidents that happen in Genesis, but one of the most striking events that happened is Jacob. Jacob, after he usurps the blessings, of course he's justified in doing so, but he steals the blessings from Esau. Esau is mad. He plans his revenge. He wants to kill Jacob, and Jacob has to flee. And he travels to Haran, and eventually he arrives there and comes to the well, and he meets Rachel, and he agrees to marry her, and Laban does the switcheroo. He marries Leah instead, marries Rachel, ends up with 4 wives and 12 sons and 1 daughter, and travels back and meets Esau. And that's Parshas Vayetze, chapters 35, 36 or so of Genesis. But before he arrives in Haran, he has a very memorable experience on the mountain, on the place, that same place, that iconic location, which we know as Temple Mount, Mount Moriah, the same place where the binding of Isaac episode happened, the same place where Isaac was praying in the field, the same place, of course, where the 2 temples were built and the 3rd temple will be built. And he goes there and he places the stones around his head and he goes to sleep and he sees the ladder and the angels ascending, the angels descending, and God appears to him and gives him an incredible blessing. He wakes up in the morning and he takes the oil and he anoints the stone and he makes up a pledge and he promises to tithe and so on. We know that story. But there's a very famous observation that Rashi cites. Of course, it's from the earlier sources. Rashi notes that before Jacob goes to sleep, he takes a bunch of stones. Vayikach me avnei hamakom. He takes from the stones of the place, and he places it around his head. But in the morning, when he wakes up, he pours oil on the stone. So Rashi asks the question, wait a minute, it started off as stones, plural, and in the morning it's just a stone. What happened? So Rashi cites the very famous, very memorable teaching in the Talmud that the stones started fighting. Overnight, the stones were fighting because each stone wanted to be the one that's closest to the head of Jacob. Alai yaniach tzaddik as rosho. On me, the stone's talking. On me, let the righteous one place his head. And the other ones, no, jostling, fighting, pushing. And the Almighty says, okay, we're going to fuse them all together. It'll be one big stone, and all the stones will be happy because they'll all be part of this pillow, this protection for Jacob. That's what Rashi says. Very famous idea, and it's a very deep idea. We don't think of stones as having much of a spiritual desire. We don't think of stones as being motivated to have some sort of connection with the righteous. But the idea is that when a righteous person, on the level of Jacob, like we can't even fathom the level that Jacob is at, he elevates everything in his proximity. So even the stones, when we see a stone, there's nothing we could do to find that spark of holiness that's found in the stone. It's so inanimate to us, even though we know it's not inanimate. There's nothing inanimate. There's particles flying at breakneck speed within every little thing. We know that on a molecular, on a microscopic level, of course. So that there's life and dynamism in everything, but to us, it's just a stone. And we leave the stone in the same place for 10,000 years. It'll be the same thing. It'll be indistinguishable. It's just fixed. It's stationary. It's inanimate. But Jacob is such an overwhelming force of holiness, of spirituality, that he's able to access, so to speak, the little spark of holiness that's found in the stone. And the stones are desirous of having a connection with the righteous person. That's the idea that we famously, how we understand this comment in Rashi. Here's the question. And this question, it's a new question. It's a clever question. I have a lot of answers. I'm not going to give you any of the answers, but I like the question. I just enjoy the question. The sources tell us that these stones had a different role that they played. Exactly 100 years before the events of Jacob's dream. Jacob is 77, Rashi tells us at the time. Exactly 100 years prior, so 23 years before Jacob was born, on this same mountain, Abraham brought Isaac as a sacrifice. And what did he do? Of course, this is the binding of Isaac episode and the Parshas Vayera. What did he do? He made an altar, which is a bunch of stones. And at the top of the altar, he placed wood. And atop the wood, he placed Isaac. And he bound him. And he was about to slaughter him. And the angel stopped him at the very last moment. And instead, he replaced Isaac with the ram. Last second divine intervention, Isaac is spared. And of course, Abraham leaves. Isaac, we presume, leaves as well. That event is forever etched into this location and into the spiritual history and backstory of our people. That was when Isaac was 37. Isaac was 60 when Jacob was born. Jacob is now 77, so it's exactly 100 years between these two events. And the commentaries tell us those stones that made up the altar of Isaac, for the binding of Isaac, they're the same stones that Jacob put on his head and fused into one because they were fighting overnight. So here's the question. If a righteous person, a tzaddik, elevates everything in their environs, and Jacob, when he's surrounded by the stones become alive, and they become desirous of spiritual experiences. Each one wants to be the pillow of Jacob. Well, these same stones, 100 years prior, there was Abraham, and there was Isaac. And there was this incredible event, the Binding of Isaac episode that we revisit every year. We look at this event as the event that ensures our survival, our continuity because of the martyrdom of Isaac and of Abraham. Why didn't the stones fight then? Why didn't they fuse together then? It's the same stones. If Jacob has the elevated status that he just takes everything around him and he just elevates and transforms it, well, why didn't it happen 100 years prior to the exact same stones? Question number one. There's a lot of answers to it. I like the question. I don't know if it's ever been asked before. That's why I like it. It's clever. It's interesting. Let's move on to question number two from Exodus. In Exodus, we read about the building of the tabernacle. And the primary foreman, the overseer of this project, is a young man by the name of Bezalel. Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur l'matei Yehuda. Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, the tribe of Judah. And Bezalel is introduced a few times in Exodus. Once in Exodus chapter 31, God tells Moshe, Re'eh, behold, I have assigned by name Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, the tribe of Judah. He's going to be the one to build the tabernacle. That's when God tells that to Moshe. In chapter 35, so 5 chapters later, Moshe introduces Bezalel to the nation. And he uses almost the identical verbiage. Vayomer Moshe b'nei Yisrael, this is chapter 35, verse 30. Moshe said to the Israelites, Re'u, behold, Kara Hashem, God called, B'Shem, that same word, Karasi B'Shem, I've called with the name, Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur l'matei Yehuda. You compare these two verses, chapter 31, verse 2, and chapter 35, verse 30, they're identical, almost identical, where the first one, Hashem tells Moshe, behold, I have called by a name. I have assigned by a name Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, the tribe of Judah. And then when Moshe tells us the Jewish people, the same thing. Behold, Re'u, God has called my name. God has assigned my name. Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, to the tribe of Judah. Now this is an unusual way to introduce a character in the Torah. It starts off, Re'eh, behold, see this. There's something wonderful and wondrous about this person, Bezalel, the tribe of Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, the tribe of Judah. So the commentaries asked, the Ramban has a whole essay. Why is Bezalel introduced in this fashion? Re'eh, see, behold. The verse could have said, Bezalel ben Uri, he's the one who's going to do it. That's not what it says. Every word in the Torah we know is important, it's necessary. Re'eh, see this, behold this sight of Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur. So the Ramban asked the question, what's so astonishing about Bezalel? And he offers a variety of explanations. He says, for example, Bezalel, what was he doing a couple of months earlier? He was a slave. The whole nation was slaves. Was he trained in the fine art of tapestry and weaving and metallurgy and working with wood and all these fine artisanal skills? Did he apprentice by some sort of master craftsman? No, he was a slave. Worked with mortar and stones. Look at this. Look what he could do. Behold, what a sight to see someone who's so talented in so many different disciplines. Behold, what a sight to behold. That's his first explanation. The second explanation is you have to see Bezalel. Because not only does he know the physical skills and trades, but he also understands the spiritual dimensions of every part of the tabernacle. Every single stitch in the tabernacle has secrets. And the Talmud says that Bezalel knew how to combine the letters that God used to create the world. Now, what that means, I don't know. But the Talmud says, Betzalel knew, he understood the skill of world building. Yodea haya Betzalel knew letzaref osios, to combine letters that the Almighty used to create the world. And he was able to do that. It wasn't just the creation of the physical space and all the physical vessels. It was all the secrets. And behold, look at this sight. And the third interpretation that the Ramban cites as to why Betzalel was a sight to behold, Ramban says, quoting a midrash, is that God showed Moshe, Re'eh, see, look what I'm going to show you. He showed Moshe a book. The book was titled Toldos Ha'adam, the Chronicles of Adam. This is a book that goes all the way back to chapter 5 of Genesis. But there's a book called Toldos Ha'adam, the Chronicles of Adam. And in this book, it lists all the important people who descend from Adam. Every generation, it's great people, it's learned people, it's leaders. It lists in this book all the future generations of Adam. And God showed Moshe, look, there's an entry here. And the entry says, in the future there will be someone who will build a tabernacle. Oh, look at the name. It says Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur, the tribe of Judah. Look, we have evidence that this has been set in stone since the times of Adam. This was already preordained, this was foreplanned ahead of time. Look, see, it's in the book. It's evident in the book. Now, this is a fascinating thing that there's this book that is called the Chronicles of Adam. And in it tells all the important people, the big players, the honchos of every generation. That's a fascinating idea. But that's the third interpretation of the Ramban, why the verse introduces Betzalel, Re'eh, see what? See the book. And look, he's the right guy for the job. That's the Ramban. So here's the question. We're going to have a question, and then an answer, and then a question. I get it. There's a book called The Chronicles of Adam, and God showed this book to Moshe. But we know that Betzalel is introduced twice. Chapter 31, God introduces Betzalel to Moshe. And chapter 35, Moshe introduces Betzalel to the rest of the nation. And when God introduces Betzalel to Moshe, he says, Re'eh, see. And when Moshe introduces Betzalel to the nation, he also says, Re'u, see. I don't imagine that Moshe showed the nation this book, this famed book, The Chronicles of Adam. So according to the first two interpretations of the Ramban, see, look how talented he is. See, look how he's able to connect the heavens and earth. That I get. Moshe was able to convey that to the nation, just as God told him, look how incredible Betzalel is. But if God is showing Moshe a book, then according to the third interpretation of the Ramban, there's maybe an inconsistency between the two instances. You don't imagine that Moshe showed this book. Moshe didn't have access to this book. God showed Moshe this book. So, according to the third interpretation of the Ramban, can we say that there is an inconsistency between the first time Betzalel was introduced and the second time that Betzalel was introduced? First time when God introduces him to Moshe. Second time is when Moshe introduces him to the nation. How do we understand the discrepancy between the first and the second instance in which Betzalel was introduced? That's a slight question. But here's the answer. The answer is a life-changing answer. After Moshe tells the nation, behold, God has selected by name Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur l'matei Yehuda. There's 5 verses. where Moshe delineates the credentials of Bezalel. And he tells the nation, God filled him with the Spirit of God, b'chachma, with wisdom, with tefuna, with insight, with das, with knowledge, u'bechol malacha, and every craft. To think thoughts, machshavos, designs, in gold, in silver, in copper, in carving of stones, in settings, in wood, in every one of the artisans' crafts. And to be able to give instruction. And he filled them with wisdom of the heart to do all the work. The carving, the design, the embroidery, the different kinds of wool, the different materials of the tabernacle. Moshe spends 5 verses delineating all the incredible abilities of Bezalel. I want to suggest that when Moshe is telling the nation, look at his skills, that's another way of telling them we can extrapolate from his skill set what role he was given in the book of Adam. Moshe is able to tell them in other words, I have proved to you that in the book of Adam, where it delineates everyone in their mission, I could tell you what it says without showing you the book, but I could demonstrate to you that Bezalel was destined to build the tabernacle because look at his skill set. The Almighty gave him the perfect skill set to be able to do it. If you look at what he was endowed with from God, you can interpolate from that he must have been in the book of Adam destined to build a tabernacle. You look at the toolkit, you look at the skill set, and you can extrapolate from that what the mission is. So to me, this was incredible insight. We all want to know what it says by our entry in the Chronicles of Adam. Wouldn't that be nice to know? Yeah, if you have a prophet tells you, that's great. We're in the non-prophet world here. We have no idea what our mission is. And we grope in the dark, trying to find direction, guidance, insight. What does Hashem want of us? That's the most important question that we can ask in our life. What am I here to do? And if what we're saying is correct, there is a way to reverse engineer what it says by your name, what the your entry in the Chronicles of Adam, what it says your mission is. You look at the tools that you were given, and that will reveal to you what your mission and destiny is. What did Hashem give you to work with? You can figure out from that what mission you are accorded in Adam's book. To me, this is like enough. This is enough for you to just dance the whole week, this insight, in my opinion. I'm a bit biased, but this is a beautiful idea. Rabban's telling us that part of the introduction of Bezalel is finding the origin of humanity and Adam and this creation and the goal of it all. And there's this book, and Bezalel's there. And Moshe could tell the nation Bezalel is in that book simply by listing his skill set. And thus we have a new way to determine what our mission in life is. Yes, certainly it's ideal if you have a prophet that just spells out what you need to do. But even absent the prophet, outside of prophecy, there is a way to figure out what you need to do by looking at your skill set, and you can determine from that what precise mission you have in life. Okay, that's the background to the question I want to ask. There's someone else who is introduced in Exodus and is given a mission in Exodus. And it seems like he's operating on a totally different set of principles. Moshe himself. God says, I want you to go to Egypt and go save the Jewish people. And Moshe says, I can't. I don't have the skills. I can't communicate. I have a heavy tongue. I'm speech impaired. Moshe's pointing out the fact that he's just not qualified for this type of work. He doesn't have the skill set. He doesn't have the toolkit for that particular mission. I have a heavy mouth, a heavy tongue. I'm speech impaired. And God just dismisses it. Who makes people speak? And what are you worried about? So how come Moshe can, at the end of Exodus, can say, well, look at Bezalel's skills. It's undeniable skills. It eminently qualifies him for the job. By that same token, if someone does not have that skills, well, they're not qualified for that job. So why wouldn't Moshe's lack of suitable skills, why wouldn't that disqualify him from doing his job? And the answer must be that there are different paths. There's the Bezalel path, where we just see he's in the book of Adam. And we see him, and it's undeniable that he's exquisitely qualified for this role. He's been prepared for it. It's his mission, even since the times of Adam. He's just destined for it. And everyone could see it. You could see it. Even if you don't see the book, you could see it just by looking at Bezalel. It's obvious to everyone that he has this incredible skill set, this repertoire of abilities, and it must be that he's the right guy for the job. And that's one way of kind of determining a person's mission. And there's a whole different way that Moshe's operating on. The skill set doesn't matter. Maybe even what it says about you in the book of Adam doesn't matter. There's another way. There's another path that's completely irrespective of skills. Now, what exactly that is, it's a subject that I've spoken about a few times. We call it the Levite path. The Levites don't follow the Bezalel rule. The Bezalel rule is find your skill set, and that's what you're here to do. The Levites, they just say, whatever needs to get done, I will do. Me la Hashem Eli, who is loyal to Hashem, join me. When Moshe made that appeal, all the Levites joined. The Levites have a different system of determining what to do. And it is, I'm loyal to Hashem. Whatever Hashem needs to get done, I will do, whether or not I'm the right guy for this job. Whether or not this is a responsibility, this is a path that is fitting and suitable for me. But that, I think, is the answer. Big subject, very interesting. But let's move on to Leviticus. Leviticus talks about a lot of things, of course, but it has a special emphasis on the sacrificial laws and the laws of purity and impurity. And this is an enormous part of Torah life. And there's all sorts of impurities, and each one has its own protocol. There's so much detail and minutia that govern the laws of purity and impurity. But one of the basic principles of the laws of purity and impurity is that impurity can be transmitted. If someone touches a dead body, they become impure. If someone's in the room with a dead body, they become impure. And there's a whole process that they have to undergo to purify themselves from that impurity. And there's laws governing what they can eat and where to let it go, and they can't walk into the temple and so on. So there's an approach of transmission of impurity by contact, by being in the same room, in the same proximity, and so on, being under the same overhang, that would transmit impurity. And the question is, and it's a fascinating question, the concept, when it comes to purity, not impurity, purity, it never gets transmitted by touch. You don't have someone who is impure, and they're in the same room as someone who is pure, and they become pure as well. This the question I always had with the vaccine, right? Someone, somewhere, for reasons that we cannot pinpoint, it's too hard to figure out, Oh yes, we could figure out that billions of years ago there was this bacteria, the soup, the primordial soup, and suddenly we have humans and trillions of species. We can figure that out. But what happened in China, where it came from, we don't know. Market, lab, we don't know. But we do know is that there's a patient 0, and the patient has a virus, and they sneeze, and they touch something, and they speak to someone, and they transmit the virus, and it begins this process that ultimately infects the entire world. My idea was, why do we need to have everyone get a vaccine? Just vaccinate one person, and let them sneeze in the room, and let them sneeze out the vaccine, and to infect the whole world with the remedy. That was my idea. I spoke to a physician. He says, no, it does not work like that. It doesn't work like that. When it comes to the virus, sure, you sneeze the virus and everyone's infected eventually. But when you get the vaccine, everyone's got to get the vaccine themselves. And that's kind of how purity and impurity works. If there's one patient 0 of impurity, it could spread that impurity onward. But there is no patient 1 of the vaccine of purity. And it's so easy to become impure. But again, there's so many different types of impurity. But the general rule is it's a process, and it can be long and arduous to get pure. So how come the transmission of impurity, of conferring a lack of holiness, it can be done so easily and so rapidly, but the other way around doesn't work? That's a question. We talked about it in the past in some of the podcasts and so on. But the idea that I discovered is that actually it does. It does. I noticed in the tabernacle, in a few places, both in Exodus and Leviticus, it cites this idea, Kol hanogea bahem yikdash, that when you purify the vessels of the tabernacle, and you pour the special anointing oil on it, the verse says upon it, anything that touches that newly anointed vessel itself becomes holy. So in the tabernacle, there was this idea that something that wasn't necessarily holy, you just put it in the proximity, you put it near, you make it touch one of those vessels, and that vessel spreads the holiness to that previously not holy, previously mundane thing. So there is a system, there is a process in the tabernacle for the conferring, the transmission of holiness. We spoke about earlier about Jacob and stones around his head. Ramchal in Mesilas Yesharim, Way of the Upright, he actually explains when he talks about this concept. He says, why are those stones, why do they suddenly care about holiness? So he explains that because Jacob was so holy, everything in his environment became holy as well. So Jacob sleeps on stones. Maybe they're ordinary stones. Nothing special about them. If you were to just take the stone before Jacob arrived, or certainly before Ibn Isaac arrived, you just take it and you analyze it in a lab, it's an identical stone. But it being around in the proximity, being touched by Abraham, by Isaac, by Jacob, that elevates them. And the stones that were previously mundane are now holy. And the theory is that really this is the inside of Messiah. The commentaries note, they calculate that the gematria, the Hebrew numerical value for the word Mashiach, Messiah, it's 358, which is the exact same numerical value as the word Nachash, meaning serpent. And the insight is that the serpent infected Adam and Eve, and that caused the whole world to be subject to the venom of the serpent. And Messiah is going to have that same power in reverse. the serpent infected humanity, and that just keeps on going until Messiah comes and reverses that. He will infect humanity with holiness, and that's how the whole world can be elevated and transformed. We always think about like Messiah's going to come. He's got so much work to do. You look around the world, you're like, wow, I don't envy that mission statement, that job description. But we learn here, it's a very deep insight. There is a process of doing what the serpent did in a negative sense to do it in the positive sense. And that could ripple throughout the whole world using this very powerful insight. And again, it's a very deep idea worthy of pondering, and there's more to talk about, but we have to go on. We have to go to the book of Numbers. In the book of Numbers, we read about how Moshe makes a decision. Maybe the people encourage him to make the decision. Let us send spies, scouts, to go reconnoiter the land. Find out what's happening there. Find out their story, how strong are they, how weak are they, how vulnerable they are, where to attack them, and so on. And he selects 12 very righteous people from the 12 tribes. And they go there. And it's a disaster. They come back with a libelous, scandalous, slanderous report. And the people start crying and they weep needlessly the whole night. And it's a disaster. And let's go back to Egypt. Let's get rid of Moshe. And it just causes Jewish people to be condemned to 40 years in the wilderness, 1 year for every day of the scouts' journey throughout the land. But there were 2 of the spies, the scouts, that remained righteous. Joshua and Caleb. Joshua from the tribe of Ephraim, Caleb from the tribe of Judah. And when the decree condemning the whole generation to die in the wilderness, when it was pronounced, there were only 2 people who were spared. Only Joshua and Caleb. From all the people that left Egypt, they're the only ones that actually entered the land 40 years hence. Everyone else died because of the sin of the spies. So, of course, there's a lot going on, and we always have a tendency to study it on a very superficial level. We know for sure that these people were very righteous. The Torah testifies they were anashim, they were righteous people. And we don't understand where they went wrong. But it's interesting that we have 2 of the spies that didn't blunder. Joshua and Caleb. And if you read the story very carefully, of course, to do that you get Rashi's help. You'll see that both of these spies, they both had a prophylactic. They both did something or experienced something that helped them. So before they're sent, the verse tells us that Joshua was previously called Hoshea, which is Joshua minus the Yud. So the word Hoshea, that was his name, Hoshea. But Moshe changed his name. And he said, no, you're not Hoshea anymore, you're Yehoshua. Which is a way of saying God will save you from the plot of the spies. So Joshua got an intervention, if you will. And then later on, this is in chapter 13, verse 22, Rashi notes that they ascended from the south, vayavo, and he came to Hebron. So Rashi says, wait a minute, they ascended, but he came. There's a change from plural to singular. Very razor sharp reading of the verse. So Rashi tells us that they ascended from the south, but only he came to Hebron. Who's that? That's Caleb. He traveled to Hebron by himself because he also sensed that something was afoot, something was amiss, and he didn't want to suffer the same fate as the rest of the spies. He went to pray in Hebron. What's in Hebron? That's where the forefathers are. Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. They are all interred in Hebron, in the cave of the patriarchs, in the Ma'aras Machpelah. that's where he went. And Rashi says he went and he prostrated himself. Nishtateach, he prostrated himself on the graves, on the tombstones of the forefathers, praying to not fall prey to the plot, to the scheme of the spies. So he also he didn't have Moshe do an intervention for him, but he took matters into his own hand and he went to pray at the gravesite of the forefathers, and that's how he survived. That's how he was not swept away into the slanderous report of the spies. So here's the observation. Caleb, when he wanted to avoid being swept away into the steam of the spies, where did he go? He went to Hebron, to Hebron. He went to the cave of the patriarchs. He specifically went to pray, not where Jacob went to pray. Jacob prayed in a different place. He prayed in Jerusalem. And Isaac prayed in Jerusalem. And Abraham prayed in Jerusalem. He didn't go pray there. He went to Hebron. He went specifically to connect with the forefathers. Patriarchs and matriarchs. That's what that's kind of the spirit he wants to channel. Joshua, there's something else that's happening with Joshua. He was Hoshea and Moshe changed his name. Not Hoshea, Yehoshua, which is a Yud plus Hoshea. The word Hoshea is Hey Vav Shin Ayin. You add a Yud to the beginning, it's Yehoshua. Very interesting. That Yud, that letter that was added to the name of Joshua, the Talmud says that letter has some history. There was someone else who had a name change in the Torah. Sarah was Sarai. And Abram had a name change from Avram to Avraham. But Abraham didn't lose any letters. Because it was Avram, you just add a hey, Avraham. Sarah, she was called Sarai, and the Yud was taken away, and it was supplanted with the hey. So there's one letter that was taken away. And the Talmud says that this letter went to God and protested, why did you take me away? And this same letter Yud that was removed from Sarai, in its place there was the hey, this same Yud was given to Joshua. So here's the observation. Caleb, when he wants to survive the plot, the scheme of the spies, he goes to the forefathers. And how does Joshua survive? Same thing. He gets the Yud. Where's the Yud from? It's from Sarah. So the question of Numbers is, why are the forefathers, the patriarchs, the matriarchs, why are they specifically the antidote to the sin of the spies? Both Caleb and Joshua, the only ones of the 12 righteous people, they all start off as being righteous. The only two that were able to navigate this successfully were Joshua and Caleb. Why? Joshua, he gets the Yud from Sarah. Caleb, well, he goes to Sarah's grave. Sarah and Abraham and the rest of the patriarchs. It seems that only by channel, the only way that they could have avoided this potential disaster, the debacle of the spies, is only by channeling the spirit and the energy and the force and the power and the righteousness specifically of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And the question is why? That's the question. And here's the answer. If you read the dialogue that happened after the spies came back to the nation, and you read very carefully, you'll notice that the dispute between Joshua and Caleb on one hand and the other 10 spies on the other hand, it's not about any of the facts that they discovered on the ground. The facts on the ground were unanimously accepted. The diagnosis of what they found, it was agreed upon by all. The difference is what to do about it. We found these incredible, powerful cities, and we felt like grasshoppers. We cannot defeat them. That's what the 10 spies determined. And Joshua and Caleb, they said, you're right. They are like monsters and we're like grasshoppers, but we'll still defeat them. We'll carve them up like bread. Alone na'aleh. If we have to climb up to heaven with ladders, we'll do that. Joshua and Caleb are saying, it's impossible. You're right. It's impossible for us to do it. But you know who does the impossible? We do. Why? Because we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their respective spouses. We have their blood and their power and their spiritual energy coursing within us. And they teach us that impossible tasks are not impossible because you have God on your side. To climb up to heaven in a ladder is impossible. Yes, we do it anyhow. To carve up these fearsome enemies is impossible. Yes, we do it anyhow. We have the force of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with us. If you're just a talent evaluator, you're a military strategist, and you assess the respective power of either side, you will come up with the definitive conclusion that there's no way to do it. There's just no way in the world for this task to be done. But what if you don't work in this world? This world doesn't hold any sway over you. Who is to say that you are limited by the strictures of physics? Who's to say that you're governed by the limitations of the natural world? Joshua and Caleb, they were armed with the spirit of the forefathers. And they said, you know what, you're right. Compared to those people, we're grasshoppers. Compared to their formidable strength, we are not capable of doing it under one set of rules. It's impossible under that set of rules. They are unconquerable under that set of rules. And we don't disagree. But we have the force of the forefathers animating us. And they show us how to do the impossible. And if you're the son of Abraham and Sarah, you're the descendant of these titans. If you embody their spirit, nothing is impossible. And that's why specifically there was a need to arm, to mobilize, to galvanize themselves with the spirit of the patriarchs and the matriarchs in order to overcome this particular problem. And I think it's also a valuable lesson for us, of course, that if we have to face challenges, and difficulties, and tasks that are literally impossible to do, we have this wild card that Joshua and Caleb deployed as scions of this nation. If we could channel their spirit, we can overcome the impossible. And finally, Deuteronomy. It's the fun question, easy question, fun question. Moshe, in the book of Devarim, recounts what he did in the book of Exodus. In chapter 9, verse 17 of Devarim of Deuteronomy, he says, "Va'etpos," and I grabbed in the two luchos, the two tablets, and I shattered them before your eyes. He held the two tablets, etched by the finger of God, so to speak, the handiwork of God, and witnessing the revelry of the golden calf, he shattered it at the foot of the mountain. The verse in Deuteronomy tells us, this is in chapter 12 of Deuteronomy, that when we arrive in the land of Israel and we discover all the edifices and paraphernalia of idolatry, we must shatter it and we must destroy it. We must uproot it. We must eradicate it. We take their pillars and we smash them. We take their altars and we destroy them. We take their idolatrous trees and we burn them. We take their idolatrous paraphernalia and get rid of it. And the verse continues, however, lo ta'asun kain laHashem Elokechem. You cannot do the same thing to Hashem your God. And what that means is that anything that has the name of God or a writing from God on it, it cannot be destroyed. Before Pesach in Houston, they have this big event where everyone brings their shemus. Now the word shemus, it's from like shemos, which means the names. Anything that has the name of God, they bury it. If you have a Torah book that somehow got ruined, you don't throw it in the garbage. You have to bury it. Why? Because it's like holy. It's like a human body that once held a soul. You don't discard it. You bury it. So before Pesach, everyone takes all their shemus and they make a big hole and they bury it. And here, in other places, they have like a shemus drop-off place. You pay $10 and you drop it off and it gets buried. Why? Because of this verse. You're not allowed to destroy anything that is associated with God. And Moshe takes the tablets, handiwork God, created by God, etched by God, with the names of God all over it, and shatters it at the foot of the mountain. So the question for Deuteronomy is, how does Moshe do that? How is Moshe allowed to shatter the tablets that had the Ten Commandments etched upon them? And now what's interesting about this is that the very last event in the Torah is the death, the burial, and the eulogy of Moshe. And the last words of the Torah is Le'enei kol Yisrael, to the eyes of all of Israel. What did Moshe do before the eyes of all of Israel? He shattered the tablets. The punctuation of Moshe's eulogy is the fact that he shattered the tablets. It's almost like his greatest accomplishment. His greatest accomplishment seems to be a violation of the Torah. That's a very fascinating question to ponder. How do you reconcile the fact that we cannot destroy anything, any article of God, so to speak, any article of holiness, and Moshe did it, and not only did he do it and he was justified, this is the apex, the epitome, the acme, and the apotheosis of Moshe's accomplishments. Fascinating question number 5. We're questioning the whole Torah here. One question for every book of the Torah. And again, the objective is not to ask specific questions and give specific answers. It's to expand our horizons, to try to think about the Torah on a deeper level. Each one of us on our own level to hopefully expand it just a little bit. A lot of fun questions, a lot of powerful questions. We asked on Genesis why the stones didn't fuse together. I think it's a cute question. It's a clever question. There are probably a lot of different answers that we can give, but I like that question. It's a brand new question. I just thought of it a couple of days ago. So maybe someone's asked it before, but I liked it. And I think that the answer that we would come up with, and I thought of a few of them. And there's probably, you can think about questions, answers to this question as well. But I think it's a clever question, and there may be something there to ponder. We talked about in the book of Exodus, this very powerful insight of how to discover what it says about you in the book of Adam. Moshe could say, look at Bezalel. You could determine from that what he is destined to do in the Chronicles of Adam. Leviticus, we talk about the idea of conferring of impurity versus purity. There is a path, there is a process, there is a means by which purity can be conferred. That's Messiah, perhaps. There's other examples of that. We talked about how in the book of Numbers, Joshua and Caleb take steps, preventative steps, specifically channeling the forefathers. And that's how they avoid the catastrophe of the spies. And finally, the book of Deuteronomy of Devarim, we talked about this very interesting question. The Moshe shattered the tablets, and that is not just okay. It's not just not a violation, it's actually his greatest accomplishment. And we ask the question of, wait a minute, what's the secret? How is this even allowed? And that, of course, is a very fascinating question, and there's a lot of ways to take it. But the questions are to be savored, I think. I love questions, especially clever ones. I hope you enjoy this one as well. If you have any comments, send me an email, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback.